My sisters handed me a dusty Nike shoebox of tangled plastic beads while they split $4 million in gold. But they didn't look close enough at the junk they gave me. I felt physically sick when the appraiser's face went pale and he whispered that one plastic ring was a rare $4 million Alexandrite. But to understand how I got here, I need to take you back to my mother's bedroom in McLean. My sisters handed me a cardboard Nike shoebox and told me to be grateful. Inside were tangled plastic beads and rusted safety pins while they divided $4 million in gold. See, here's the thing about being the oldest daughter. You are expected to be the spine, while everyone else is the heart. I stood in my mother's bedroom in McLean yesterday afternoon. The air smelled like stale lily of the valley and expensive floor wax. My sister Imani was already at the vanity. She didn't even look up as I walked in. She was sliding a 22-karat gold bangle onto her wrist. The heavy metal clinked against her watch with a sharp, greedy sound. It was the bracelet my mother wore every single Sunday. Imani looked at her reflection and smiled. It wasn't a smile of grief. It was a smile of ownership. Sable was standing by the walk-in closet with a velvet tray. She was humming a soft tune while sorting the rubies. She didn't want the history of the stones. She just wanted the social status. They provided in Great Falls. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. My hands were cold and damp against my skirt. I cleared my throat. When I saw Sable toss a sapphire ring into her handbag, Shouldn't we wait? Shouldn't we wait for Alistair to appraise these? I asked. My voice sounded thin in the high-ceilinged room. Imani finally looked at me. Through the vanity mirror, her diamond earrings caught the sun and nearly blinded me. "Oh, Zora, don't be so dramatic," she said. She reached under the bench and pulled out a dusty orange box. It was an old Nike shoebox from the 90s. The lid was torn at the corner and held together by a rubber band. She pushed it toward me across the hardwood floor. "We went through the junk earlier," Imani said with a dry laugh. "This is more your speed, isn't it?" Sable giggled from the closet and didn't even look my way. "Precision is a form of love," I whispered to myself. It was a phrase my mother used to say when I was a girl. I remembered 1988 so clearly in this very room. My mother sat me down on the same bed. Her ringed fingers brushed my hair away from my face. She told me that true value is hidden where the light doesn't reach. I looked at the shoebox at my feet. It felt like a slap to the face. I knelt down and picked it up. The cardboard was gritty with decades of dust. I felt the weight shift inside as I lifted it. It was surprisingly heavy. For a box of costume jewelry, I sat on the edge of the mattress. My sisters continued to strip the room like elegant vultures. I pulled the rubber band off the box. Sticking to the lid was an old Polaroid. It was the three of us as teenagers at the country club. I was blurred in the background, a shadow behind their bright smiles. In the photo, I was wearing a delicate gold chain with a small key. That necklace was missing from the vanity today. I looked down into the box. My eyes caught a glint of something beneath a pile of blue glass beads. It wasn't plastic. It wasn't rust. It was a dull, heavy, gray metal. I recognized immediately from the archives. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I could feel the pulse in my neck. My sisters thought they were winning. They thought they had left me with the trash. They were laughing about a brunch. They didn't notice my fingers trembling. The archive never lies. I realized then that they had no idea what they had just given me. We were raised to be better than this, but they chose greed over sisterhood. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I took the box and walked to my car. I drove away. I didn't know that my sisters had just handed me the key to ruin. The heavy oak door of my home office clicked shut. I felt the silence of the house pressing against my ears. It was 2014 a.m. I set the orange Nike shoebox on my archival table. The surface is professional grade steel. I turned on the overhead magnifying lamp. The light was clinical and cold. I upended the box. A pathetic pile of plastic beads and rusted pins tumbled out. It sounded like dry bones hitting the metal. I pushed the tangled mess around with a pair of tweezers. My hands were steady. Decades at the Smithsonian taught me how to handle debris. See, here's the thing. Value isn't always shiny. I spotted a row of heavy tarnished buttons. They were dull and felt unnaturally heavy for their size. Beside them lay a brooch encrusted with what looked like cloudy glass. I picked it up. The metal felt oily against my thumb. I smelled something faint. It was Mother's signature rose perfume. It clung to the velvet lining of the box. My throat tightened. I felt that old, familiar ache in my chest. I reached back into the box to pull out the lining. A small scrap of paper fluttered to the table. It was gray and brittle. The handwriting was jagged and hurried. It said, "Don't let them see." I recognized the slope of the letters immediately. Mother wrote this 2 weeks before she died. The date in the corner confirmed it. My heart began to thud against my ribs. Don't let them see. She didn't mean the public. She meant Imani and Sable. I remembered how Imani told me the diaries were lost. She claimed a basement flood destroyed everything from the 70s. I stared at the note under the magnifying glass. The paper was dry as dust. No water damage, no mold. Another lie to add to the ledger. Precision is a form of love, and I was the only one who loved the truth enough to keep it. I picked up my desk phone. I dialed Alistair's private number. He answered on the third ring. His voice was thick with sleep. I told him I had some junk for him to look at. We agreed to meet for a drink later that afternoon. I spent the rest of the night sorting the pins. By dawn, my eyes were burning. I grabbed my cell phone from the charging dock. I saw a text from Imani. It was a photo of her wearing the emerald necklace. She looked radiant. I decided to call her. She picked up and laughed. She asked if I was enjoying my craft supplies. I kept my voice flat and measured. I told her I was having the box appraised for fun. The silence on the other end was sudden. It was heavy. Her voice went from condescending to razor sharp in a second. Alistair pulled into my driveway at exactly 4 o'clock. He was wearing his usual linen suit and carrying a leather briefcase. See, here's the thing about Alistair. He has appraised the finest estates in Virginia for 30 years. He expected a quick laugh over some 1980s costume jewelry. We sat down at the mahogany table in my living room. The afternoon sun was hitting the dust motes in the air. I pushed the orange Nike shoebox toward him. He looked at the rusted safety pins and tangled plastic beads. He chuckled and reached for a green plastic mood ring. It was the kind of thing you get from a coin machine. Then he stopped talking. He didn't set the ring down. He held it up to the light near the window. I watched his fingers. He wasn't laughing anymore. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a jeweler's loupe. Then he pulled out a second one. Precision is a form of love, and Alistair was suddenly very precise. He pressed the lenses against his eye. The room went deathly quiet. I could hear the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Alistair's breathing became heavy and labored. He didn't say a word for 3 full minutes. My hands went cold. I could feel my heartbeat pulsing in my fingertips. He moved the loupe to the side of the plastic band. I saw a tiny glint of something under the light. It was a hidden hallmark. A tiny crown symbol was etched into the inner rim. That symbol shouldn't be on a child's toy. Alistair's face went pale. He dropped the loupe onto the table with a sharp clack. He looked at me with genuine shock in his eyes. His forehead was slick with a thin layer of sweat. The archive never lies, and neither did his expression. He reached for the heavy gray metal pieces next. He weighed them in his palm, one by one. His hands were shaking so hard the metal clinked together. We were raised to be better than this, I thought, but my sisters had thrown this away. They had called it junk. Alistair cleared his throat, a dry, raspy sound. He looked at the glass brooch with the oily sheen. He touched the surface and pulled his finger back quickly. It was as if the metal had burned him. He looked like he had seen a ghost in my living room. I just sat there clutching my cold cup of tea. The porcelain rattled against the saucer. The silence in the house felt suffocating and heavy. He finally looked up from the shoebox. He didn't look at the jewelry. He looked at me and whispered, "Zora, did your sisters see this? Tell me they didn't see this." Alistair didn't answer me at first. He just stood there in my office, staring at that green plastic mood ring. See, here's the thing about experts. They don't get quiet unless the world is shifting. He finally looked up, and his face was the color of unbleached parchment. "Zora, this isn't plastic," he whispered. He held the ring under the magnifying lamp. The light hit the stone, and it shifted from a muddy green to a deep, bloody red. "It's Alexandrite," he said. "One of the largest specimens I've ever seen in a private collection." My heart hammered against my ribs. I felt a cold sweat prickle my hairline. Then he picked up one of those dull, heavy buttons from the shoebox. He scraped at the surface with a tiny tool. Beneath the oxidation, something sparked like a trapped star. "These aren't buttons, Sora," he choked out. "They are raw, uncut diamonds." He told me they likely came from a defunct colonial mine. My vision blurred for a second. I had to grip the edge of my steel archival table to stay upright. Alistair started doing math on a yellow legal pad. The scratching of his pen sounded like a hacksaw in the silence. He looked at the glass brooch next. He didn't even have to say it. The glass was white sapphire, set in a platinum base that had been intentionally tarnished. "The box," Alistair said, his voice trembling. "It's worth roughly $4 million. My stomach did a slow, sickening roll. $4 million in a Nike shoebox. Just then my cell phone chimed on the mahogany desk. It was a text from Sable. I picked it up with shaking fingers. The timestamp said 3 a.m. The message was short. "Did you throw that trash box away yet? It's cluttering up the memory of Mom." I stared at the screen until the light dimmed. Precision is a form of love. That's what I've always believed. My mother wasn't being cruel when she gave me the junk. She was being precise. She was hiding the sun in a basement so the wolves wouldn't find it. I remembered a dinner back in 2024. We were sitting in that drafty dining room in McLean. Imani had her hand over Mother's, holding a silver fountain pen. She was whispering about how I was too busy with the archives to handle the estate. She convinced Mother to make her the sole executor right there. I watched the ink dry on that paper. I felt so small, so overlooked. But Mother had been watching too. I looked back down at the orange shoebox. I began digging through the tangled plastic beads at the very bottom. My fingernails scraped against something hard and cold. I pulled it out. It was a small, tarnished brass key. It didn't fit the jewelry armoire or any door in this house. It was just there, waiting. A wave of calculated fury washed over me. We were raised to be better than this. My sisters thought they had won the war with their rubies and gold bangles. But there was a problem. If this box was real, then what exactly were the heirlooms? What were those rubies they were already trying to sell? The heavy brass knocker on my front door slammed 3 times. The sound echoed through my empty hallway like a gunshot. It was exactly 10:14 p.m. My heart hammered violently against my ribs. Alistair froze at the mahogany desk. His eyes went wide behind his jeweler's loupe. He looked at the $4 million in loose diamonds and sapphires spread across the yellow legal pad. "See? Here's the thing. We were raised to be better than this." But my sisters did not know the meaning of boundaries. I grabbed my phone from the desk. I opened the Nest security app. The screen glowed blue in the dark room. The outdoor camera showed a black Mercedes parked at my curb in Great Falls. Imani was standing on my porch. She was wearing a beige trench coat. Her sharp eyes were locked onto my doorbell camera. Inside the car, Sable was sitting in the passenger seat. Sable was scrolling on her phone. They were scouting my house. I shoved the green alexandrite ring deep into my cardigan pocket. My fingers curled around the cold metal. I looked at Alistair. I whispered, "Don't make a sound." I swept the loose diamonds into the orange Nike shoebox. I shoved the box under the desk. My hands were shaking. I could smell the metallic tang of fierce sweat on my skin. I walked down the hallway to the front door. The wooden floorboards felt freezing beneath my bare feet. I took a deep breath. Precision is a form of love, and right now I needed to be very precise. I unlocked the deadbolt. I opened the door just a few inches. Imani did not wait for an invitation. She shoved her shoulder against the heavy oak door. She pushed right past me into my entryway. The smell of her expensive French perfume instantly choked the air. She did not take off her coat. She stood on my Persian rug and crossed her arms. Her eyes darted around the hallway. They landed straight on Alistair's leather briefcase resting on the bench. My throat went dry. I tried to clear my throat. Imani smiled, but her eyes remained ice cold. She said, "Zora, honey, you look exhausted." I gripped the door handle tighter. I felt the cold brass dig into my palm. I asked her what she was doing here so late. Imani took a step closer to me. She said, "I realized I made a mistake." I didn't blink. I asked her what mistake. Imani reached out. She grabbed my left wrist tightly. Her manicured fingernails dug into my skin. It felt like a physical violation. She was checking my bare fingers for jewelry. She was looking for any sign of our mother's real wealth. She didn't find any. She let go of my arm with a huff. She said, "I accidentally left something in that old shoebox." I asked her what she was looking for. Imani smoothed her trench coat down. She said, "A sentimental silver charm from a summer camp." I knew she was lying. Imani never went to summer camp. She hated dirt and bugs. She was here for the box. My brain cataloged her lies in real time. The archive never lies, and neither do greedy sisters. Imani looked past my shoulder toward my back office. She asked if Alistair was here. I told her he was just leaving. I told her we were doing standard tax paperwork for the estate. Minnie didn't buy it. She laughed a sharp, dry laugh. She said, "Tax paperwork at 10 at night? Don't lie to me." She walked toward my office door. I stepped in front of her. My pulse was racing. I could feel the heat rising in my neck. She stopped just inches from my face. She looked at my messy hair and my old sweater. She tried to use that old big sister tone. She tried to make me feel small. She used to call me the boring librarian. She used to laugh at my sensible shoes. Now we were standing in my hallway and the power dynamic was shifting. I looked her dead in the eye. I didn't back down. Imani tilted her head. She smiled that fake pageant smile that she uses when she wants something. She reached out and patted my cheek. It was incredibly condescending. Then she looked toward the office door again. She said, "Zora, honey, you look tired. Why don't you let me take that box back to my place? I'll organize it for you. See, here's the thing about Imani. She thinks she can steamroll anyone." I stood my ground in that dimly lit hallway. My heart was thumping hard against my ribs. I shoved my right hand into my cardigan pocket. My fingers curled around the cold alexandrite ring. It was heavy. It felt like an anchor. Imani leaned in closer. Her perfume was thick and cloying. It smelled like jasmine and desperation. She demanded the shoebox. I did not blink. I told her the box was in my locked car. I told her I would bring it to brunch tomorrow. That was a lie. Imani narrowed her eyes. She checked her gold watch. It was 10:24 p.m. She finally backed away. The oak door clicked shut as she left. I locked the deadbolt. My legs felt like jelly. I sank onto the Persian rug in the foyer. Alistair peeked out from the dark office. He was holding his leather briefcase. He looked like he had seen a ghost. I told him he had to go. I let him out through the side garage door. I walked straight into my home office. I shut the double doors. I needed answers. I pulled out a dusty blue file folder from my filing cabinet. I dumped the contents onto my mahogany desk. These were my mother's old papers. I found her personal bank statements from 2023. I ran my finger down the cold paper. My eyes stopped at a recurring charge. Every month there was a payment of $5,000. It went to an LLC called Everbright Replacements. The payment stopped the exact month Mother got sick. I stared at the ceiling fan spinning overhead. I know that company name. It is a famous high-end pawn shop in Baltimore. I specialize in costume replicas of real jewels. My stomach did a violent flip. I felt bile rising in my throat. Mother was broke at the end. She was desperate. She had pawned the real family jewels. She bought fakes to replace them in the vault. The rubies and gold bangles my sisters were fighting over were worthless glass. See, here's the thing. Precision is a form of love. Mother knew I was the only archivist in the family. She knew I would look closer. She left the real gems hidden in the junk box for me. She left the fake garbage for the wolves. I pulled up my own laptop screen. I opened my private family database. I looked up Imani's public tax records. She owed $300,000 to the IRS. I checked Sable's social media. She was leasing that Mercedes. Her credit cards were maxed out. My sisters didn't just take the jewelry. They took the assets they planned to use to pay off their own massive debts. And I was sitting in the dark holding the only real money left. See, here's the thing. Precision is a form of love. I knew exactly where that brass key belonged. I left my house in Great Falls at 6 a.m. The morning fog was heavy over Georgetown Pike. I didn't wait for brunch. I didn't wait for Imani to show up with her fake smiles. The shoebox was locked in my car trunk. The brass key was tucked inside my wool coat pocket. My fingers were wrapped around it. The metal was cold against my palm. I drove straight into downtown Washington, D.C. By 8:30 a.m., I was standing outside the old marble building. The sign read, Merchants Trust Bank. The air inside smelled of ozone and lemon polish. I walked straight to the vault desk. I slid my ID across the scarred oak counter. The clerk didn't smile. He led me down a spiral iron staircase. The basement vault was silent. It felt like my archives at the Smithsonian. A thick steel gate separated the living from the dead. The clerk stopped at box 412. He inserted his master key. Then he stepped back. Precision. I pulled the small brass key from my pocket. My hands were shaking. My pulse was thudding in my ears. The lock clicked open. I slid the heavy metal box onto the viewing table. The clerk left the room. The heavy iron door shut with a thud. I was completely alone in the vault. I lifted the lid of the gray metal box. There was no gold inside. There were no diamonds. Just a single leather ledger. It was worn at the edges. The cover was dark navy blue. I opened the first page. The text was in my mother's slanted cursive. It was written in English and Urdu. The title read, Final Truth. My breath hitched in my throat. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. See, here's the thing. The archive never lies. This book was an inventory. It was dated January 2024. The left side of the page was labeled, The Real Blood. The right side was labeled, The Glass Shatters. Mother had meticulously documented every single theft. She listed the emerald necklace. She listed the ruby tiara and the gold bangles. Next to each item, she wrote a dollar amount. Emerald necklace replaced with glass November 3rd, swapped at the Baltimore pawn shop. Net payout, $80,000. Ruby suite replaced with cubic zirconia February 10th, swapped through Alistair. Net payout, $110,000. My mother had pawned her own empire. She was broke. She sold the real jewels to survive. She gave my sisters the worthless glass replacements. She watched them fight over fake stones. Then she wrote down where she hid the real money. Uncut diamonds inside the junk shoebox buttons. Alexandrite stone inside the plastic mood ring. Platinum base masked as the rusted metal brooch. At the very bottom of the page was a note. For Zora, who never asked for anything. You are the only one who will look closer. Keep them safe from the wolves. Tears burned my eyes. I gripped the edge of the cold metal table. I wasn't the forgotten daughter. I was the trusted one. I closed the heavy ledger. I tucked it deep inside my leather tote bag. I locked the empty safety deposit box. I climbed the iron stairs back to the street level. I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the bank. The bright morning sun hit my face. I pulled my sunglasses over my eyes. I looked across the busy city street. My blood ran ice cold. A silver SUV was parked at the curb. It was Sable's car. Imani was sitting in the passenger seat. She was staring directly at me through the windshield. They were following me. The silver SUV was idling right outside the Merchants Trust Bank. I didn't run. I walked straight to my car on the asphalt. See, here's the thing. The archive never lies. My tote bag felt heavy against my hip. The navy leather ledger was tucked inside it. Alistair's name was written in that book. He had helped my mother pawn her real jewels. The sisters in the SUV did not know that yet. They did not know their own vaults were filled with glass. I unlocked my sedan and tossed the bag onto the seat. I drove straight back to my house in Great Falls. The clock on my dashboard read 10:14 a.m. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the SUV was gone. They were playing a game. Fine, I can play better. I walked inside my quiet living room. The air smelled of lemon polish and old paper. I set my purse on the mahogany coffee table. My hands were shaking. I forced myself to breathe. Precision is a form of love. I walked over to the tall oak bookshelf. I pulled out a heavy encyclopedia. I placed a small black hidden camera behind the spine. The lens pointed directly at the sofa. I adjusted my glasses to check the feed on my phone. The living room view was crystal clear. It would capture every single flinch on their faces. I took a deep breath. I dialed Imani's number. She answered on the second ring. I could hear the hum of a car engine in the background. I said, I'm done fighting. Come over. I will give you the Nike shoebox. There was a sharp silence on the line. Then Imani laughed. She said, smart move, Zora. We will be there in 20 minutes. I hung up the phone. I went to my home office. I grabbed the orange Nike shoebox from the desk. I carried it back to the living room. I placed it right in the center of the coffee table. The cardboard was dusty. The edges were battered. It looked like trash. It was actually worth $4 million. My stomach twisted into a tight knot. I sat in the armchair and waited. At 10:43 a.m., tires crunched on my gravel driveway. The front doorbell rang 3 times. I smoothed my wool cardigan. I walked to the front door and opened it. Imani and Sable stood on my porch. Imani wore a sharp white trench coat. Sable clutched a designer purse to her chest. They did not look like sisters who had just stalked me. They looked like cats approaching a bowl of cream. I stepped back and let them inside. We walked into the living room. Sable's eyes darted immediately to the coffee table. She saw the orange shoebox sitting there, A slow sneer spread across her face. It was the same look she gave me at the reading of the will, pure disgust. Imani walked gracefully to the sofa and sat down. She pulled off her leather gloves. She smiled up at me. She said, "Thank you for being sensible, Zora. We were raised to be better than this." I felt a hot surge of bile in my throat. I swallowed it down. I sat in the armchair opposite them. I looked Imani in the eyes. I said, "I want us to be a family again. That box is all I have left. If it heals this rift, you can take it." Imani leaned forward and grabbed the box. Her manicured nails dug into the cardboard. She let out a sharp, cold laugh. She looked at Sable and then back at me. Her voice was pure venom. She said, "You really are as pathetic as Mom said, Zora. Giving up the only thing you have left just to be loved. See, here's the thing. You can steal a box, but you cannot steal the truth." I stood there in my living room. I watched Imani clutch that orange Nike shoebox to her chest. She was grinning like a hyena. Sable was right behind her, smelling of expensive French perfume. They thought they had won. They thought they had the prize. I just looked at the grandfather clock. The time was exactly 10:52 a.m. I felt a cold calm wash over me. Precision is a form of love. It is also a weapon. I cleared my throat. "You both look so pleased," I said. Imani laughed. It was a sharp, ugly sound. She tapped the lid of the box with her manicured fingernail. "We have what is ours, Zora," she spat. "You always were the pathetic one." A wave of nausea hit my stomach. I swallowed the bile down. I adjusted my glasses on my nose. The archive never lies. I reached into my cardigan pocket. My fingers wrapped around the heavy brass key. "Go ahead then," I said. "Open it." Sable frowned. She looked at Imani. Imani did not hesitate. She ripped the lid off the cardboard box. She stared down at the tangled plastic beads. She stared at the rusted safety pins. She pulled out the glass brooch. She pulled out the green plastic mood ring. Her face shifted. The triumphant grin melted away. "What is this junk, Zora?" she demanded. I leaned my shoulder against the doorframe. My heart was thumping hard against my ribs. "That is your inheritance," I said. "That is what you left for me." Imani grabbed the mood ring. She held it up to the living room light. It shifted from murky green to a deep blood red. "This is plastic," she hissed. I smiled. It felt foreign on my face. "No, Imani, that is natural alexandrite. It is worth millions." Both of them froze. Sable took a step forward. Her designer heels clicked sharply on the hardwood floor. "You are lying," Sable whispered. I shook my head slowly. "The buttons are raw diamonds. The brooch is solid platinum and white sapphire." Imani dropped the mood ring back into the box. It clattered against the cardboard. Her hands were shaking now. "Then what did we take from the estate vault?" she asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. I walked over to the mahogany coffee table. I picked up my phone. I tapped the screen. I opened the live feed from the hidden camera. It was hidden behind a heavy encyclopedia on the oak bookshelf. "You took Glass," I said. "Mom pawned the real jewels years ago." Imani went completely pale. She looked like she was about to faint. She grabbed the edge of the velvet sofa to steady herself. "That is impossible," she gasped. I pulled up the digitized bank statements. She used a company called Everbright Replacements. She swapped every single ruby and emerald for high-end counterfeit. Imani began to hyperventilate. She fumbled in her white trench coat pocket. She pulled out her own phone. The screen lit up. I saw an email notification at the top. The sender was Sotheby's auction house. The subject line read, "Urgent authenticity issues." I watched her eyes dart across the glowing screen. The auction house had tested the rubies. They knew the rubies were fake. Imani let out a choked sound. The phone slipped from her numb fingers. It clattered onto the Persian rug. Face up, glowing. "I already signed the contract," she choked out. "I already spent the advance money on the Miami condo." I looked at her. I felt no pity. "Then you are in a lot of trouble," I said quietly. "Sotheby's does not like fraud." Sable was hyperventilating now. Her hands were gripping her hair. "What about my share?" she shrieked. "I maxed out my cards for that Mercedes." I looked at them both. We were raised to be better than this. Mom knew what you were doing. She left the real items in the junk box for me. Sable let out a primal scream of rage. She lunged for the shoebox in Imani's arms. "It is mine," she screamed. "Give it to me." She tackled her sister onto the living room floor. They scrambled on the rug. The box overturned. Beads and buttons scattered across the floorboards. But I just turned my back on them. I walked toward the front door. The real diamonds were already safely at the bank. I had swapped them for glass fakes hours ago. The ledger was locked in my car, and my finger was hovering over the upload button for the police. I did it. I pressed the send button on my phone. The blue progress bar crawled across the screen. My hand was shaking as I watched it. It hit 100%. The video was in the hands of the Fairfax County Police. In the living room, the screaming stopped. I walked back inside from the porch. My sisters were sitting on the Persian rug. The floor was covered in fake plastic beads. Imani was holding a glass brooch. It was the one I swapped out hours ago. Her face was red. She looked at me with pure venom. She said, "You swapped them, you thief." I didn't yell. Precision is a form of love. I smiled and pulled up my phone. I played the hidden camera recording. Imani's own voice filled the quiet living room. In the video, she called me pathetic. She called me clueless. Sable winced at the playback. The color drained from her face. She smoothed her wool coat with trembling fingers. I walked right up to Imani. I looked down at her. "See, here's the thing. The archive never lies." My chest felt tight, but my voice was cold steel. I said, "I'm the thief. You tried to sell Mom's house while she was in the ICU." Imani froze. Her eyes went wide. I reached into my cardigan pocket. I pulled out a printed screenshot from our shared iPad. It was a Google Maps timeline. It showed Imani at a real estate office. The date was June 14th, 2024. The exact time was 2014 p.m. That was the hour Mom was in heart surgery. Sable gasped. She looked at Imani. I stepped over the spilled plastic beads. I grabbed my car keys off the mahogany table. I said, "Follow me." We walked out into the driveway. The night air was freezing. My breath fogged up in the dark. We stopped at my parked silver sedan. I unlocked the trunk. I pulled the heavy navy leather ledger from my tote bag. I slammed the book down on the car hood. I flipped it open to the final page. It was Mom's jagged handwriting. I read it out loud. "Zora is the only one who didn't try to bury me while I was still breathing." My sisters both started crying. Big, ugly, desperate tears in the driveway. Imani grabbed my wrist. Her grip was tight and painful. She whispered, "Zora, please. We can fix this. Don't ruin us." I shoved her hand away. My skin crawled at her touch. I opened my phone again. I showed her the active Sotheby's fraud notification. I showed her the email about her $300,000 tax debt. They were drowning, and they knew I held the life raft. We were raised to be better than this, but they chose greed. Now they were begging. Sable was sobbing into her designer sleeves. I looked at them both. I felt a sudden heavy wave of pity. They looked so small under the yellow driveway light. Two grown women crying over glass beads. I tapped the heavy ledger cover. I gave them one choice. Leave this house and never contact me again. Or I hand this footage and the ledger over to the police for inheritance fraud. 3 weeks after I stood in that freezing Great Falls driveway, the silence in my house was deafening. Imani and Sable were gone. They took my ultimatum and vanished into the Virginia night. The Fairfax County Police had the hidden camera footage. My sisters chose exile over a prison cell. It was a Tuesday afternoon in April. I was sitting at my kitchen table, nursing a lukewarm cup of Earl Grey tea. The steam rose in thin spirals against the window. My hands were still shaking, but not from fear. It was the exhaustion of victory. Precision is a form of love. The archive never lies. I needed to finish my inventory. I drove to the Merchants Trust Bank in McLean. The vault room was freezing. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I sat in a private cubicle with my safety deposit box. Inside rested the navy leather ledger. Beside it sat the real diamonds from the shoebox buttons. But there was something else. A thick book bound in faded red fabric. I pulled it out. The cover was stained with age. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was our mother's private diary from 1974. Imani swore this book was destroyed in a basement flood. See, here's the thing. My sister lied. The pages were bone dry. The paper smelled like cedar and old paper. I opened the front cover. My mother's jagged handwriting filled the pages. I flipped through the dates. Then I saw a folded yellow paper tucked inside. It was a bail bondsman receipt from August 2016. The name on the receipt was Imani. The amount was $80,000. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. That was the exact price of my mother's pawned emerald necklace. My throat tightened. My eyes burned. I cleared my throat. Imani always claimed she was the golden child, but she was the reason our mother went broke. Our mother sold her own legacy to keep her favorite daughter out of a jail cell. I flipped to the very last page of the red diary. The entry was dated 2 weeks before our mother died. She wrote about the heavy metal pieces and the dull glass buttons. Precision is a form of love. She knew I would be the only one to look closer. She wrote, Zora sees what the others refuse to. She protects what matters. My hands gripped the edges of the table. A physical wave of grief washed over me. Mother didn't lose our fortune to greed or carelessness. She spent it buying her daughters out of their own messes. She left me the junk shoebox as a secret thank you. It was a shield against the wolves. It was a reward for my loyalty. I closed the diary and walked out into the bright afternoon sun. I drove back to my house in Great Falls. I walked straight into my backyard garden. The air smelled of damp earth and blooming wet lilacs. I sat on the iron bench near the rose bushes. The metal was cold through my wool cardigan. I looked at the red diary resting in my lap. My mother died thinking she was a failure. I'm going to use her junk to make sure she's remembered as a queen. The police report sits on my lap. It is heavy, thick paper, dated April 21st, 2026. 3 weeks since I stood in my driveway in Great Falls. 3 weeks since my sisters drove away into the Virginia dusk. I am sitting in my backyard garden now. The air smells like wet earth and azaleas. A cool breeze lifts the pages of my mother's 1974 red fabric diary. It rests on my knees. See, here's the thing. The archive never lies. It just waits. I trace the gold setting of the ring on my right hand. The Alexandrite stone shifts from green to a deep bruising purple under the patio lights. It is beautiful. It is real. My sisters are gone. I changed my locks the very next morning. I blocked their numbers. No more texts. No more frantic calls. They are swallowed up by their own greed now. I open my silver laptop on the wrought iron garden table. The screen glows in the dark. I navigate to the Washington Post homepage. I click on the local news tab. There it is. A headline burns into the screen. Anonymous donor gifts rare colonial diamonds to Smithsonian. I lean forward and adjust my glasses. The text states the collection is officially named the Amara Legacy. That was my mother's name. Amara. It means immortal. I feel a hot tear spill over my eyelid. It slides down my cheek. I take off my glasses and wipe my eyes with the back of my hand. Precision is a form of love. This was my precision. I saved her name. The article says the gems are worth millions. Raw diamonds, a white sapphire brooch, pure platinum. My sisters thought it was junk. They wanted the flashy gold in the vault. Let them have it. That vault is filled with high-end glass. Sotheby's filed a fraud lawsuit against Imani yesterday. I saw the legal notice on my screen. She owes them $500,000 for a bad advance. Her Miami condo is being foreclosed. Sable's leased Mercedes was repossessed 2 days ago. I watched a tow truck pull it from her driveway on my iPad. They are drowning in their own shortcuts. We were raised to be better than this. I close the laptop lid. The garden falls back into shadows. The real fortune is safe. The uncut diamonds are at the Merchants Trust Bank in McLean. The navy leather ledger is locked in my safety deposit box there. No one can touch it. My hands are cold. I tuck them into the pockets of my wool cardigan. I look up at the dark Virginia sky. I feel a strange weightlessness. For 40 years, I was the quiet one. I was the eldest daughter who just organized the family photos. The one who took the insults. The one who got the shoebox of trash. But a trained archivist knows how to look beneath the dust. I knew the weight of real treasure. I knew how to wait. My sisters are facing prison time for fraud. Alistair is cooperating with the police to save his own license. The whole house of cards collapsed. I pick up the red diary from my lap. I hold it to my chest. It smells like old paper and rose perfume. Mother left this for me. She knew I would look closer. She knew I would save her. I stand up from the iron bench. My knees ache slightly from the cold. I walk toward the back porch glass doors. I slide the heavy door open. I step into the warm kitchen. The clock on the wall reads 2014 a.m. I am exhausted, but I am finally free. It is funny. My sisters thought they buried me. They didn't realize I was the one holding the shovel. So, if you're out there and your family treats you like the junk pile, just remember, some things only show their true color when the light finally hits them right. And my light? It's just getting started. If this story hit you tonight, please drop a like on the video. Subscribe if you want to hear more about how this legal battle unfolds. Turn on notifications so you do not miss my next update. Drop a comment below. Tell me what you would have done in my shoes. I read every single one of them. Where are you watching this from right now? What time is it where you are? Let me know. I am going to get some sleep now. Good night.